everybody's kind of a jack of all trades in that department.
You have to be. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And the more trades that you are a jack of, the more useful you are as an employee.
I was actually referred to you by one of my followers, and he said, you got to check out this guy, Riley Tench, super cool guy. And but he also was, he wanted me to reach out to you because he does lighting, and he had some questions.
Sure.
I guess we'll start off with some of the simple ones. Can you give me just a day? What is your daily routine as a lighting tech on the ship?
Well, it definitely varies from day to day based on the crew's schedule. So, a port day is going to be very different from a sea day, for instance, because when you're at port, all your guests get off the ship and you don't have anything to do really. There's no events or activities really taking place that need lights. During a sea day, things get a lot more interesting. You've got like matinee shows and crew staff events and all this other stuff that happens. So it really varies. It also depends on what venue you're working in, because the events and activities between venues can wildly vary. If you're in the theater, you're running shows in the theater. If you're in the music hall, you're doing lights for the DJ during like the nightclub section, and then you've got like crew staff events and movies playing on the projector screen where the lights have to just be off and stuff like that. So there's a lot of things to juggle depending on what venue you're in. But yeah, generally it's just a mix of, those filler events in between the larger production shows with like the full cast and full lighting and like the projection and all that stuff. Those are like kind of the main events, I'd say, in any one of the venues. And then the rest of it is just, game shows and cruise staff and stuff like that. And in between that, when there's not events going on, that's when I use that time to like work on lights and do maintenance and fix things that are broken or upgrade systems and stuff like that. So that's another huge part of my job is like, if a light breaks, you can't just ship it back to the vendor and get it fixed. It's, you're on the other side of the world in Asia, like that would take months. So, you have to be creative. You have to come up with solutions to fixing stuff, and you have to be able to open up a light and replace lamps and stuff like that.
Interesting. Yeah, I never really thought about that, but that is very true. And, now thinking about it, they do have very specific work areas on cruise ships where they, sometimes they've got like a woodworking area.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and I know it's pretty often for like, for example, sound guys to fix their own equipment, especially when they're on set.
Oh yeah.
So just the idea of you opening up a light, having to switch out a lamp or something like that, just whatever, if something falls. Yeah. Like, I suppose you could go to the next port and, buy a new one, but it's not as practical as having Riley do it.
And we don't usually have the budget for that kind of thing either. That's the thing is, you're constantly fighting for budgets for parts and all sorts of stuff. It's just like any other large company where you have to really justify your expenses and stuff like that.
Right. How much support in that area do you get from your team with lighting, or is it really just you?
I'm spearheading the lighting movement for any specific venue. So you're generally, it depends on the size of the ship. The really big ships will have like 3 or 4 light technicians. But generally you get assigned to a venue. This is your venue. This is your lighting rig. This is your lighting console. You learn the rig. You learn the problems with the rig. And then you just know it. And then you fix stuff. So if there's a problem that requires other people, you reach out to your team, you set up a time. And then like if you need a rigger to come in and drop a light from the ceiling with like ropes and pulleys and stuff like that, you can have them come in and stuff like that. The thing about cruise ships is, you're paid a set contracted amount. So there's not really a whole lot of fighting about how many hours you work as long as you're not breaking ILO. So, yeah.
And for those who are not familiar with ILO, the International Labor
Maritime
Organization
Agreement, or something like that.
It's basically 14 hours.
It's the cruise ship workers union. Yeah, there's a certain number of hours you're allowed to work per day,
Mm-hmm.
And if you go over that, the company gets in trouble. So don't do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that's one of those big things that's on cruise ships. And, there's a lot of people who have this like negative stigma with cruise ships and like, oh yeah, they'll work you and this and this. And not to say that it doesn't happen, but at the same time, my experience on cruise ships is they were really, really strict about that, where you'd have to, log into Chronos and for anything that you do.
Yeah, definitely. All the time. Yeah, they're really strict about it. And if you violate ILO, if you don't have a good excuse, like, if you come up with a good excuse, like say there's a complete meltdown in my lighting rig and I just cannot conceivably not work for less than the set amount of time, then, I just got to do it. And emergency maintenance is an excuse that I can use to justify that. But it has to be a good excuse. And otherwise you'll get in trouble.
What are some of the specific challenges that you've encountered with your position as a lighting tech that many people would not really realize is a challenge?
Being a lighting tech on a cruise ship is a very different job from being a lighting tech on land. And I think that's the same for pretty much any job on a cruise ship. The structure is completely different. The workload is completely different. You're not a lot of lighting technicians on land. You'll just be, showing up to your venue, programming the show, and everything will already be set up. And you don't have a lot of responsibilities outside of your desk, your lighting desk, and the show. You have to make sure that runs, make sure it looks good. That's your job. But, on cruise ships, like many other positions on a cruise ship, the lighting technician is expected to do all sorts of stuff. You're expected to help out in lots of different areas, and having a very wide, diverse skill set when it comes to entertainment technology is very important. Yeah, that was definitely an adjustment for me when I first started with ships. I'm definitely used to it now, but that's definitely something that I think people will find challenging when you first get into it, if you're used to that mentality of just, you have your job and you do your job and you don't have to do anything else,
Right. Yeah, I remember, so my experience on cruise ships is as a musician, and I was a venue musician, so I'd be bouncing around different venues, and I knew I knew the lighting tech, and so he would be setting stuff up, but every now and then he would bring me an amp, or he would I would tell him like, all right, well, we got a different setup today and I got to plug this in, and so he'd have to run the cables and this and this, and and it's interesting because from that perspective, like, I only knew he was a lighting tech because he told me, and it also said it on his badge, but I would have just assumed that he was just any of the other AV tech guys,
multi-purpose technician.
Exactly. So that's how I pretty much saw everybody. It's kind of like everybody's kind of a jack of all trades in that department.
You have to be. Yeah, absolutely. And the more trades that you are a jack of, then the more useful you are as an employee. Definitely. Like, there's been problems with like video that some of the broadcast guys were having problems with, and then if you have video experience, you can go help them. Nobody's gonna get mad at you for doing somebody else's job. That's my mentality. If I can fix a problem and I'm capable of fixing a problem, some people are like, no, let the person that's paid to do it. But like, I don't know. Just
right. Well, yeah, it's very different from your standard corporate environment where it's like, that's not my responsibility.
Exactly. And some people try to carry that mentality over to cruise ships, but I just don't think that works.
No, definitely. Well, like what you realize really easily on cruise ships, it's kind of like when you're in a theater or you're on set, or like that whole experience of working on cruise ships it's hard for everybody in its own way.
Yeah.
And people realize that very quickly, and so it's easy to come together because we're all going through our own challenge on the cruise ship.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, your first contract is probably the biggest and hardest adjustment period. I think once you have one contract under your belt, it gets a lot easier. You know what to expect. You've figured out where to get things and how things work and where things are. But yeah, it's definitely a challenge. It's a completely different way of life from what most people are used to. And yeah, it totally changes the way you think. You forget what day of the week it is. You know,
every day is a Monday and a Friday. That's what I've always said.
Exactly. That's such a good way of saying it.
How long did it take you to get accustomed to being on the cruise ship and ship life in general when you first hopped on?
Probably about 3 months, I'd say, to really feel comfortable to the point that, you know, I could distinguish myself from new people that were just coming in.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, there's a lot to learn in a short period of time. You know, lighting technicians on Royal get about 2 weeks, if you're lucky, to hand over to the next guy. So you have 2 weeks to learn your job. And I was coming in with probably less experience than I should have. I mean, I had to, actually, on my first contract, I didn't get any handover. I was a brand new hire, fresh into the cruise line business, and I had nobody to help me, really. I mean, there were people to help me, like the other technicians were like, you know, there for me, but it was really just up to me to quickly figure out how to run this crazy multi-million-dollar venue that I'd never even come close to working with something like that before. And, you know, I figured it out. I'm still here, but
sure.
That was a huge challenge, was, you know, figuring that all out. I had to run a production show and call follow spots on my second day at work. And yeah, I figured it out, but it was not easy.
The whole figuring it out thing, I feel like, is a very common thing on cruise ships as well. You know, just because I feel like a lot of people, they don't. You walk on the ship and there's not a lot of information out there to really prepare you, and I don't think there ever really will be to really prepare you 100%, because it's a whole different thing in itself.
But yeah, it's kind of its own world, you know. Crew life in general is this very small subsection of working class people, you know. So I mean, it's so different. It's a totally different lifestyle, and it's very hard to know what it's like until you're actually in it.